Welcome everybody to Teamfight Talkshow. That's right, we're back. It's been a couple weeks, but here we are. DoA back with you again. I otherwise known as Urf. You can see the laurels. It's true. With me, of course, is my co-host Dan Frodan. Ciao, as usual, and we have a special guest today. All our guests are special, but Jirachy is no exception. How you doing, Jirachy?
Hi, oh my god, I'm doing fantastic. It's so exciting for me to just like be on Teamfight Talkshow because like I've been watching for a while. I'm just like, hey, I want to be on that someday, and now I'm here and I'm excited.
Well, we're happy to have you. We've got a lot to talk about. Frodan, how's it going?
It's okay, man. Though I am down real bad in TFT. I think I've lost like 400
saw you
LP or
rank.
something. It's not great. It's not great. I'm trying to hang in there. I was gone for just 1 week in Las Vegas with some of the TFT streamers, and I feel like I don't even know how to play this game anymore. It's it's wild. So perhaps a little taste of what a lot of other people have experienced in this set throughout different various periods, where it just feels like it comes back and you don't get it anymore. So, but I'm curious to hear a little bit of perspective from Jirachy, because I know Jirachy actually even posted something similar earlier this set about some of that. So great guest, and I've seen Jirachy compete as well as watch their stream. So it's going to be great to have them on. Welcome.
Yeah, so let me tell you the moment real quick where Jirachy appeared on my radar, right? So it was like the set 4 regionals, I believe it was, and Jirachy played a game where you got basically all defensive items. So you had to kind of just build a bunch of like Sunfire, Warmogs, like Trap Claw, Frozen Heart, like just only defensive items, and you still managed to put together like a really good finish that game. I believe it was like a 2 or a 3 if I remember right.
I remember this game very specifically. It was like I think my items at Krugs were like Frozen Heart, Redemption, Warmogs, and this was like before Redemption was what it is now of like, oh, this is like really strong tank item. So yeah. I just looked at my items. I'm like, okay, my items are garbage. Time to just slam everything, play for HP, and just pray I get a top 4. And that ended up being a second. I was just like, get me out.
Yeah, well, but I saw that game and was like, all right, this gamer knows what they're doing. Like, they know how to take a rough situation and turn it into good. And it was such a good lesson for TFT players out there. So I always go back to that game as well. But I want to go back even farther than that. And we need to give you a bit of an introduction. So I want to hear about your gaming background, your competitive gaming background especially. Like, what brought you throughout your gaming life to end up settling in a TFT?
Well, I started... Like, the first competitive game I really played was League, and I started back in Season 4 in 2014, and kind of played that for a while, but never got higher than Plat in that game. It was never, like, a competitive game for me. It was just, I'm playing this for fun, I'm just playing with my friends, like, cool, and then, in, like, Mid-Set 1, some of my friends introduced me to TFT, and I was like, hey, I'm down to try out another game, let's see how this goes, and then hit Diamond in set 2. I was like, okay, I'm already better at this game than I am at League. Let's just keep going. And then it was just climbing from there. It was like Master set 3, GM 3.5, and then I finally hit Challenger in set 4. And then, and at that point, I was like, okay, I can like start streaming. I can start playing tournaments. I can start maybe like pushing for the higher ranks. And that kind of culminated in, like, I hit rank 4 in set 4.5, and then I ended up at regionals, and I was like, okay, wow, I'm at regionals now. I'm, like, actually doing this thing. And I remember I was 1 point off of making finals, and I was sad at the time. I was like, okay, you know what? I'm still impressed with myself I made it this far, but, like, TFT is the first game I've considered myself to be, like, good at, really. Before that, I was just like, oh, I'm just playing video games for fun, and then TFT just happened. I'm like, oh, I'm good at something now? That's weird. Okay, well, we'll see how far it goes, and now we're at this point. Yeah.
Can you talk about like 1 or 2 major breakthroughs that you had mentally to help get past certain barriers? I think a lot of people have similarities to your journey, but maybe they haven't gotten past that Masters barrier or Grandmasters, even just, maybe reaching Diamond for the first time. If they want to emulate that kind of trajectory as you have over a few sets, what do you think were some of the key lessons that you learned along that way?
I think I can very specifically remember 2 breakthroughs, one in set 4 and one just this set in set 5. And set 4, like I hit Challenger in the first patch and then kind of like fell off. I was stuck in GM trying to figure out how to like replicate that success. And then I had kind of like a group coaching with some of the friends I made that set, and they just brought a whole new perspective on how to play early game with like slamming items and like really aggressively pushing levels. And that's like where that play style kind of started to come into play. And I know a lot of people know me for being like super aggressive, like DoA just mentioned that one game, like, okay, play super aggressively around my items, conserve a bunch of HP. That's where that really started. And like I think like a week after that coaching, I jumped from GM to like rank 20 or something. So like that was like my first breakthrough of like just changing my mentality of how I play the game. And then this set, I started out really struggling. I got stuck in Diamond 1 for a while for the first couple weeks, and then got stuck in like Masters, and then got stuck again in GM. And at that time, I was really just like grinding out games. I was just like, okay, just play game after game after game. Like something's gonna click eventually. And then had a talk with some of the same guys about just like changing up my mentality of like, hey, I don't have to just like beat my head into a wall, and just like being way smarter about how I'm approaching the game and how I'm approaching grinding. Like instead of just beating my head into a wall, playing games over and over, instead like playing like a good number of games, but like talking about the game a lot, hanging out in streams, watching other people play. I think like changing my approach to how I get better and how I grind really helped out this set.
Okay. And it's interesting too, because you have a little bit of a different pro trajectory than a lot of players, right? Because you seem to excel in the tournament environment, whereas we see a lot of other notable pros excel on the ladder instead. So can you kind of speak to that for a moment too, where it seems like you almost prefer to, you know, make progress in terms of the overall esports, you know, season in tournaments over just ladder grinding?
Yeah, I think with ladder grinding, I know like it's probably impossible for me to hit rank 1 just because I know I'm not the type of player who's going to play perfectly literally every game, which is kind of what you need to do to hit rank 1 and be like that ladder grinder. But I know in tournament where it's almost a different mental space you need to be in, I think, where you have to like you just super focus up for these like 6 games a day instead of like you're grinding out like 20 games in one day. Like you, instead of keeping your concentration and yourself together over that long stretch of time, instead just like hyper focusing in for these 6 games. And this is where kind of like I think my mentality and how my brain kind of works actually favors me a little bit, because I have a lot of ADHD. And I've talked to like my psychiatrist about this actually, about how like I get like this hyper focus mode when I'm playing TFT. As like the flip side of outside of TFT, it's super hard for me to focus on anything. But like when I'm locked in on something, I'm like super locked in. So it's like these 6 games I'm playing today, like I'm super focused in, and I can play super well for just these 6 games, and then I can just like kind of chill mentally a little bit. But I think it's just how I approach the game mentally, and like the mental aspect to how you play tournaments. I think it actually favors me a little bit there over ladder.
That's really interesting, actually, because that is a big difference. You know, it's one thing to play on ladder where you're going to maybe allow a lot of those other distractions in, rather than, you know, being in a tournament environment where it's like, you know, it's all or nothing with these games, right? So you have to hyper focus at that. Yeah, that's really interesting. I love the takes between ladder players and tournament players, well, ladder players and tournament players, you know, as it were. But there are different mindsets that go into it, totally. But let's talk about some of the mindsets that go into the current meta right now in the game. As we talk a little bit about 5.5, obviously, or not 5.5, 5.0. We know 5.5 is coming. In fact, the last big tournament on 5.5 is coming this week. Dan and I are casting that. Jirachy is playing in it. It's going to be great. We'll talk more about that later. But for now, let's take a look at the final patch of 5.0. 11.14 Not a ton of huge changes, but you know, it kind of, and we were chatting about this before the show started, but it kind of feels like as patches come and go, the style of play remains consistent, but the synergies, it's in terms of which one is on top that week, is kind of what rotates. But I'm curious about your take on this patch specifically, Jirachy, but also just your take on the meta in general right now. I know you've spoken about that a little bit recently anyway, but you're on our show now, so you have to talk about it again. So go for it.
Yeah, and I know I have talked about this a lot recently, but I feel like the game is like the game's in a weird spot right now. Of like, there's a lot of things you can play. Like, I was writing down the comps that I'm willing to play tomorrow for mid-set, and I was like, I have like 10 or so comps that if the game points me in that direction, like, sure, I'm okay playing that. But they all kind of fit within this confine of like, you decide your comp early, you play vertical synergies, and that's what makes, I know that's what's making the game feel frustrating for a lot of people right now. It's not like that. It's not that there's not a lot of things to play, because there's so much you can play right now.
Yeah.
But they just all fit within this confined space almost. So like, you're restricted in the way you play the game, but not what you play within that restriction.
Yeah.
So the game feels balanced, but it's only balanced within this one way to play the game, and that's what's frustrating people more than anything.
That's interesting. What do you think about that, Dan?
Yeah, I think that Jirachy hit the nail on the head. There's actually a lot of variety. It's just that you don't have the flexibility to go from one comp to another. So lateral transitions are very hard. There's only a couple that you can really do. And even then, they're extremely risky. So the most prominent example might be the Aphelios Rangers. You very rarely ever start out just trying to stack Rangers or anything like that. And you're just like pivoting laterally to it in the late stages of the game. But I've seen so many people take eighths because of that. It's a composition that, when capped out, is one of the strongest in the game. I mean, I don't think anyone will deny that if you hit the Kindred, you get the good items on Aphelios, you have reasonable frontline, and the Mystics, you're just going to crush a bunch of the comps out there right now. But a lot of people that try to do this, including like Bobe, who is, you know, kind of infamous right now in North America for crushing the ladder in just like 80 games or so, like averaging a 2.1 or something like that, like absolutely nuts.
Nutty.
The only time I've seen him ever take eighth is like from play, trying to attempt an Aphelios lateral pivot. So that's kind of frustrating, I think, for some of these top players. But for people who, you know, really want to stay along, you know, a general guideline, like they have their early game direction, kind of like Chosen, right? A lot of people used to play set 4 and set 4.5 based on the early Chosen that they got, and they really enjoyed having that just be their North Star for the entire game. That kind of exists now, except it's in the form of like what kind of early powerful synergy of a core 3 you can build, and try to see if you can aim for that 6 variant. Otherwise, you know, like mix and match a little bit. Sometimes people straddle by playing like skirmishers plus like, you know, some Dawnbringers and figuring out they want to stay in the Dawnbringer tree or maybe just commit to the skirmishers, stuff like that. But there's not really too much, which I think is
Invoker's late.
So some of the top players say that's kind of it's boring to them. But you know, we have also see some players show us some innovative play styles, because I think something Jirachy was mentioning was even amongst top players, there's still not a consensus on like what's the best starting item, what's the best comps to play right now, and it seems like there's still a little bit of rotation. I think the only thing everyone can unanimously agree upon is that Abomination Zyra might be a little bit too strong if you get the ball rolling. But outside of that, I think I've heard so many different opinions on top comps right now.
You know, that in particular is funny because it almost seems like 5.0 has come full circle, right? Where Zyra Abomination was like the dominant comp coming out of PvE, and now it may be one of the best, if not the best comps coming at the very end as well. So it feels like we've come full circle. It feels right in a way. And I say that as someone who loves playing Abomination more than anything else right now. But I think it's interesting to see the cycle of life happen, as it were. But the cycle, you know, must continue, right? And that means that we're going to look ahead to 5.5, which is going to completely change things. Now, Jirachy, we were talking a little bit before the show again, and you said you had not touched PvE yet. That's smart because you are competing in a 5.0 tournament this week. So yeah, you don't want to muddle your brain with all sorts of games and thoughts about how things work, how the balance has changed. But we're going to talk a little bit about 5.5 anyway here, because there are a lot of changes. The big one is that the mechanic is changing completely. Shadow items are going away. Radiant items are coming in now. I like the direction of this personally. To me, it feels very good to play it in game and get that Radiant item on 3.6. But I wanted to get opinions as well. So, Jirachy, just in terms of what you've seen so far, what are your feelings going into set 5.5?
Yeah, and like you said, we talked about this. Yeah, I haven't touched PB at all. Like,
Yeah.
and I've told myself pretty much all the previous sets, like, I'm either going to focus on one set or the other. And in previous sets, it was like, okay, I have nothing to play for this set. We're just gonna full pivot PBE, and I can really focus on that, get a jump on learning things, and really come into the next set swinging. This set, it is the complete opposite. I still have mid-set finale to play for, so I'm not going to touch 5.5 at all. And there's not a lot happening in like the beginning of set 5.5. And if anything, it's like, okay, if I don't make it to regionals through mid-set, then I have to go for snapshots, and that's the first 2 weeks, and it is what it is. But in the meantime, yeah, no, not touching set 5.5 at all. But I think I from what I've seen, I've peeked at stuff. Like, it's not like set 5.5 hasn't completely existed. I think the Radiant, the concept of Radiant items, I actually really like them, because I think the shadow items are really cool. I love the armory. I actually love the armory system so much, because of how much it's just added choice you get to the players, and it's added skill expression, like, oh, which items do I pick from this armory? What direction does that take me in? But with the shadow items, it's more skill expression, knowing like which shadow items fit who. But it's one of those factors that kind of limits things, because like the drawbacks, sometimes you just cannot play those shadow items on certain units. I know Sox talked about this in a twit longer, like before the Shadow Jewel Gauntlet change, where it was just flat percent HP as the penalty. Like, you could not play that on Karma. You had Shadow JG, you couldn't play Karma anymore. And now if you have a Shadow JG, you can play it on Karma or Vel'Koz. But some of the shadow items are restrictive in that way, and just from what I've seen of the Radiant items, they're not restrictive in the same way. It's just, oh, you have this item that you want on your carry, cool, you get an extra bonus out of it, and it'll fit better on some units than others, but it's not like a Radiant item will be actively bad on a unit, at least from what I've seen. I could be completely wrong about this, but it looks like, it does look like a move in a good direction of like opening up flexibility for how you use these items, rather than making it more restrictive like the shadow items can right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Frodan, you've played a little bit of PvE, right? What's been your first impressions on that?
My first impression was that it didn't feel that different. I think that a lot of people echoed this sentiment, which was that it felt like PB was this, or rather the 5.5, every mid-set should feel like a pretty dramatic shakeup. You almost feel like you have to learn a new set, but you have some at least ideology or rules and guidelines to follow, right, based off the previous set. But I think now this feels very similar to set 3.5, where it wasn't actually that dramatic of a shift compared to set 4.5. And it could be Riot saying, hey, look, we recognize that the Festival of Beasts, set 4.5, was a little bit too much. We changed many different traits and took out an entire tree that was core like Dusk, and instead, put a bunch of different things that I think was a little bit more controversial compared to set 4, which is so well received. So in set 5.5, it feels like they're doing a little bit of that. If we can scroll back up and just kind of show the champions removed, it just seems like they're taking a little bit from each tree, and then like adding in Sentinels, which is like the new big vertical. Sentinels gains attack speed based off the shield that they give to the lowest ally, I believe, and then when it breaks it, it passes to a different one. So it's kind of got like that Dragon Soul aspect, where a little bit of Dark Star. But yeah, like outside of like Coven and Dragon Slayers, there's not really anything that's like hugely gone, except for the fact that Forgottens now are basically warlords, which is really interesting, I guess. Interesting from a design concept. Like, did Rise just like, oh well, warlords were okay, and that was actually a pretty fun power fantasy. Maybe it'll work out here with Forgotten.
They had to make some change because they couldn't rely on shadow items anymore, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All these units are great to remove. The only one that I kind of will miss is actually Darius. I think Darius was actually a really interesting unit, especially when you foiled it with Garen. But Rise and Shadow Blue buff could stay in the grave. That's where they belong. Kindred was definitely a little bit too oppressive, just with how powerful of a binary effect with like whether or not you hit it or not, and your comp could perform. And Coven's given us so many problems. So I'm down for all, and GiantSlayers as well. I'm down for all of them to go away. So.
Yeah, it's felt really good playing on 5.5. It definitely feels like a more polished version of Reckoning, which I think is kind of the intent. And I got to be part of an internal playtest before the PBE and everything got announced, and we talked to the devs a lot. And I don't want to speak for them at all, of course, but like, it seemed like they did want to go in more of a direction that we saw in 3.5. You brought that up, Frodan, where 4.5 was just a huge, massive amount of changes. And I think they want to keep it a little bit smaller to keep it easier for people to access the game from a casual standpoint. And also just to not shake things up too much to cause more balance woes, right? Like, you take out a few problem things, you put in a couple new things, and then you've got this big item switch as well. And the Radiant items, I think are fantastic. I really had a lot of fun with it. I think we've got a couple to show here too. But the idea is that if you're unfamiliar with it, basically now there are no more shadow items. At round 3-6, you get to choose between 5 different Radiant items, which are basically like super mega powerful versions of regular items. And so you're going to get a choice of 5 out of a possible 35, I think is the total for that. So you're going to need to, make a meaningful choice each game, but you're not going to be able to count on seeing one particular item. There's no such thing as forcing a certain Radiant item, because there's just, it's like a 1 out of 7 chance, I suppose, when it boils down to it, whether you'll see it or not. So I like that it does not, and people have said, oh, it's like chosen for items. And I would kind of push back on a little bit, because Chosens tended to show up and dictate your comp early in a lot of cases, or some players allowed that, as we talked about earlier. Whereas these come in at a point in the game at 3-6 where you're kind of already feeling out what you're going to be playing that game. You've gotten a lot of item components already, and so you're looking out of this for something to augment your team comp rather than define it or cause you to go in a totally different direction. You can sometimes, but it's very risky to do that. So I like that, and you get to use a crazy powerful item too, and then you get to look around and see what everybody else got. It felt good. Obviously, these items are going to need to be balanced over time, but I enjoyed the impact that they had on the game and the games that I played. And you can definitely screw yourself over too if you pick the wrong item. You gotta make sure you're picking something that actually does work with your comp too, because you can just end up getting something that's kind of useless. So I like that there's that risk in there too if you pick poorly.
It is a little concerning, the first sentence after they show these shadow items, which is, we want to create moments where there's a jackpot that shapes your game. And the thing is, it's not just a jackpot that shapes your game, it's a jackpot that shapes the other 7 players in your lobby's game as well.
And that's not, though.
I don't. Yeah, and so far... Well, I don't necessarily, I can't really speak too much to that, but I would say that part of the issue with shadow items in general is that it's the same problem actually in card games, which is that the more options you are, creates more scenarios where it is a very clear best item for a certain champion. Similar to like the more cards there are, you actually see less diversity because everyone should be building the same kind of deck. And so what ended up happening is in these card games, they create rotation. They create a format where you ban certain cards, and this year only certain things are eligible. And so actually you'll end up finding that sometimes fewer option inspires more creativity. And that's the problem with shadow items, is that it didn't give you much creativity because it was a very big difference of regular blue buff and shadow blue buff, for example. And to give you that little dynamic of how that ends up interacting with champions. So what I worry about with Radiant items is that we're still kind of going to be in a situation where there's 35 new items and like the power level across them are not even, and it ends up being such a huge spike with like different combining factors, right? Like you can still get some of these like early legendaries that spike. I can't tell you how many times I'm seeing like Heimerdinger on 7 that's 2-starred. It's just like, it's kind of egregious at this point. And then they get a Radiant on top of that. It's just like absurd power level. So it just comes. What I don't want is that game to feel like it was just decided there and then based off of it. And I know that items have just become such a headache to balance. So it is something that I'm concerned about. And I hope that some of the lessons we learned in set 5 will actually carry over to ensure that doesn't get out of control.
I think this has definitely been a big learning set for the devs for sure. But we're still, you know what, TFT is about 2 years old right now. We're only in set 5, so there hasn't been a lot of time to try a bunch of different things. But it'll be cool to look back on this a couple more years down the road, right? Where we'll probably see some of these same concepts revisited, but in a much more polished way, built on all the understanding that they're gaining from things right now. So I think it's going to be neat to see this game develop because it's fun, but then we also get to see how all of this affects it down the road. But I guess I want to throw one more 5.5 question at you, Jirachy, and are you particularly excited about playing any particular new legendary champion or using a new Radiant item? Is anything standing out at you trait-wise or something like that you're looking forward to playing?
Nothing. Honestly, nothing's really stood out to me yet except Akshan.
Oh,
like,
okay.
Akshan it reminds me a lot of Samira from 4.5, and of course, if he's anything like Samira from 4.5, it's gonna be kind of a nightmare to balance because it's either he blows up the entire board and just kills everything and there's not much you can do, or he's absolutely useless. And
sure.
Let's not have that problem again, please. But if he is anything like Samira, I feel like Samira got into a really good spot by the end of 4.5, where it's like you put in the resources and gave her the board, gave her the necessary synergies, gave her the items to pop off. She wasn't just like a carry you could put in with whatever and she would auto carry your team. It was you had to give her the support, but once you gave her that support, she could really pop off. And if Akshan is anything like that, then I'm actually excited for that because I really like having I really like playing Samira in 4.5 because it felt good like giving her those resources and getting to that point where you really could let her pop off. And if Akshan's anything like that, and from what I've seen, it does kind of seem like that. So if those assumptions are correct, I am excited for that.
I would say there's definitely some similarity in that you have an AD carry that jumps around the board when they do their ability, that kind of thing. He becomes untargetable when he's using his ability, which definitely I think makes it a challenge to balance, at least I would imagine, where, you know, like you said, if he's too powerful, he's just going to blow up the whole board when he's not targetable. But if you make him too weak, then, you know, he's just not going to be played. But also, it's been fun so far, and it's kind of cool too, on a different note, to see a new champion in TFT at or slightly even before he's seen in Summoner's Rift. That's kind of interesting. That's something that we haven't seen before. So a unique sort of moment for TFT. So that's kind of cool as well. But yeah, I think it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to diving into the PBE hardcore after this weekend. I was playing a bunch of PBE. Like we had Frodan and I had a rehearsal on Monday, and everybody was saying like, "Oh, I've been playing so much 5.5. Now I have to go back and like remember what's going on in 5.0 again for this tournament this weekend." So we're back in the 5.0 world again for the next 5 days at least. But then it's hardcore into the 5.5 PBE. It'll be a lot of fun. It'll be cool. But I think it's time to move on to everybody's favorite segment. It is Agree, and we've got some fire ones today. It's going to be interesting. It's a mistake to introduce an entirely new mechanic mid-set. Jirachy, agree?
Okay, I'm gonna say disagree, but only because of like the scope of the mechanic they're introducing. If it was like if it was a new mechanic they're introducing on the scope of like a new like whole set of like, oh, we had chosen mechanic for set 4, now let's go over to armory and shadow items for 4.5. Like that's too much of a change. Like no, let's not do that. But like adding these new mechanics, I feel like is a good thing for the game. It does make that half set feel. It makes the half set feel like a continuation of the 0.0 set, I guess, but still like distinct. And I think that's a really good thing for like this half set structure they're doing.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Don't forget in chat there is a poll as well, so you guys at home can vote too. Frodan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's too heavy-handed to say it's a mistake. We already went through one set where we had a entirely new mechanic, which is the Lucky Lanterns in set 4.5, and I think that was great. It was a little confusing because there was not. So one of the things that TFT has always struggled with is just visibility of like what these interactions are and what they're capable of. So we didn't know exactly what the Lucky Lantern odds were, and it took me a long time. It took me way too many games to figure out that it didn't happen. It happened at different intervals with different like scaling treasures inside the Lucky Lanterns. And the fact that we're pretty upfront about it this time is a lot better. So I think that's also, it's like these little things that Riot learns in their design process goes unnoticed because people are just focused on what they don't like. But they did learn, and this is something that, they took a risk on that paid off, which is a big mechanic update on top of their set, exactly what Jirachy's saying, which is a continuation. So I don't think it's a mistake whatsoever. I think it's a good idea to introduce a new mechanic. But it can easily turn into a mistake if it's not tastefully done.
Right.
So just have to be careful. That's all.
All right. I'm going to put a disagree on this one too, but I'll expand a little bit on what you just said, where I think this is a situation where there did need to be a big shakeup in terms of the core mechanic of the set. Shadow items were really intriguing and very fascinating from a high level perspective, right? If you like to get super deep into the game, you like to analyze all this kind of stuff, there are issues that goes with that as well, but it's fun from that perspective. That said, it's really difficult to pick up from a casual perspective. I know casual is a little bit of a dirty word in the esports scene, but the fact is most of the people that play a video game, not just TFT, but any video game, are casual players, right? So you want to make the game fun for them too and accessible, and I think shadow items made that a little bit tough. So I think this is one of those situations where a major change needed to be done. I think this was a good way to do it in terms of it still is thematically in tune with shadow items. We're just going to radiant items now. We're kind of moving on with the story. But yeah, it's something definitely that you don't want to pull the ripcord, as the term has been used in other games too often if you can avoid it. It looks like chat agrees with the disagreement. So that's that one. Let's move on to question number 2. The current competitive system in NA places too high of an emphasis on ladder performance. This is an interesting one for you, Jirachy. What do you think?
Oh man, this is a hard one for me because I think it's because tournaments right now they really are too short to capture like the full extent of like how good someone is, because there is so much variance in this game, and like we do need something like ladder to be like to be like a good indicator of like who gets invites to things. And I don't want to be biased, but as someone who doesn't qualify for any of these things off a ladder, but I think even right now I say agree, and I think it's just a little bit. I think the qualification spots off of ladder do need to be there, because like ladder is still a decent indicator of how good someone is, but I don't think I don't even think they should be the majority of the spots that we get, because I know right now regionals it's 12 spots from ladder and only 4 from this whole qualification tournament process. And if anything more of like some kind of 50-50 balance makes a little bit more sense to me, but it's not that there's like emphasis on ladder that shouldn't be there at all. Like we do need a ladder as an indicator, but it is a little bit favored too much towards ladder right now.
Okay.
At least that's what I think.
I like seeing our guests actually wrestle with a question. Sometimes if I feel like it's too easy of an answer, but this one I'm glad there was some internal debate going on there. That's good. Frodan, what do you think?
I waver back and forth as well. I think that it's good that we over-index a little bit too much for ladder, because if you think about it from an abstract point of view, ladder is the biggest open tournament in the world. It's just very, very hard to keep continuously grinding on it, because there's so many other things that come into play, right? For example, one of our co-casters, Esports Law, just had his first child, and God bless his family. Hope that everything's going well, but that also put a complete stop to him pursuing anything competitively, because he just cannot keep up with ladder performance. It's just not what it is. But he still hit top 100 challenger in like less than 100 games, so he clearly is good enough at the game to compete. But does he have access, incentives in order to do that? Probably not. So that's definitely a little bit lost because you actually want people like Esports Law believing he has a chance to beat people like Jirachy. That's what Jirachy feeds upon. The casual competitives who watch these streamers and think I can do better than them if I just had more time, if I was a little bit more lucky, if I had a little bit more resources at my disposal. And that's what keeps the system alive. It's the middle class, though. It's the middle class that supports TFT. You need to have aspiration. You need to have aspiration. And right now, ladder is one of the best ways to do it because without ladder, we wouldn't be discovering the second wave of North American talent. You wouldn't see Goobums, New Battle, and DQA signed by Invictus Gaming. Congrats to them, by the way. We didn't put that in our news. Yeah, but they proved themselves through ladder set after set. And I think that's what ladder can do. So does it put too high? Potentially, but I'm just going to put a soft disagree here because I think ladder performance is also the biggest open for you to qualify from. I just think we need to tweak it so that people aren't camping and sitting. That's the only thing. That's my number one gripe right now. As long as we can remove the sitting aspect of it, then I'm good.
All right, that's a whole nother debate right there. Is how do you remove that aspect of it? Because that's another tough one. We'll have to tackle that one on a different day. I'm gonna agree with this, but not because of the reasons that either of you said. I'm gonna do it just because I like more TFT tournaments. I just love watching the tournaments more than tracking ladder results. So I just want to see more of that. I want to see an ecosystem in TFT esports where we have more tournament organizers putting on more, bigger events that draw more of these top players away from the ladder and into this more entertaining, in my opinion, tournament environment. So it's a bit personal, it's a bit selfish, but I want more tournaments, so I'm going to agree. It looks like chat agrees 100%, actually. That might be the first 100% we've ever had. Chat wholeheartedly wants less emphasis on ladder, apparently. Bunch of casuals. But I agree with them, too, so it's okay. Yeah. Let's move on to our next question. Let's go to number 3. It's Riot listens to challenger players too often.
Oh. I don't know. Do I even have an answer to this? But I don't have like an in with Riot or anything. Like how often do they really listen? I'm gonna say a disagree. Sometimes I think they don't listen to us enough. I think sometimes like we have complaints about the game and they're just, and if more just here, like don't murder me or anything. But like, I feel like sometimes like oh god, he's here. Oh no. But like it's not just like more people besides like Soju and Kyun and like these very like vocal streamers, like they have their very public opinions, but a lot of I feel like a lot of like the more low-key challenger players, like we also have very strong opinions on like how the state of the game is and how the game is balanced. And if you like I'll talk to people and we'll look at patch notes and be like, we had concerns and they're not really being addressed. And like some of the changes, like I can see why this change was made. Others, like to me, P-Brain, who has never worked at a video game company in their life, I'm just like, okay, I don't understand this change. There must be some reason for it. I don't know, but sometimes it feels like challenger players, not like challenger streamers, like challenger players are like, we know a lot about this game and we all have different viewpoints on this game because we all play the game in a very different way, and sometimes like it feels like we don't get our voices heard enough sometimes. But I don't know, that's just me.
All right. Hey, well, your opinion is legitimate. That's why you're here. We want to hear it. So it's disagree from Jirachy. Frodan, where do you stand on this issue?
Jirachy, close your ears. I hard agree with this. I think Riot, unfortunately, crosses their wires at times because they're listening to the challenger players' feedback and ends up creating a dynamic where there's not much representation from the casuals outside of Twitter, and they just yell. Like the casuals on Twitter yell at more, like and Whitrock and the Riot devs. It's actually kind of wild to just go out there and see what they just kind of send. They actually type these 180 characters in full send. It's pretty interesting. And I think that a lot of the problems in set 5 showed up because we listened to a ton of the feedback from high elo specifically and didn't account enough for low end, right? Like part of the reason why shadow armories and all these different stuff like that was introduced was to appease the more competitive hardcore player in general. And it just didn't exactly land super well despite good intentions. I think set 5 might just be like the perfect example of game design where it's like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. A lot of good stuff went into it. Remember at the beginning of the set, a lot of these challenger players were saying like, this is probably going to be the best set ever. Just look at all these cool different things that's going to happen that gives you more agency and choice and all these little complicated stuff. And, then, fast forward a few months later, everyone's posting the player base numbers of how it's dwindling dramatically and how, viewership has been dropping a lot. And, viewership isn't, of course, indicative entirely of a game's health, but it does show a little bit of its marketing arm of what's happening lately. So, these kinds of things I feel like is not because Riot shouldn't listen to challenger players. Don't get me wrong. It's not that they shouldn't listen to people's concerns and issues. And I love that Riot engages because, believe me, and DoA also, there's a lot of developers who don't listen to any of them, and it's very frustrating to work with them.
Out there.
So Riot should continue to listen to challenger players, but in terms of are they listening to them too often versus how much they're indexing for other players' concerns and what they want from a game like TFT, I think that I have to agree with this.
All right. Wow, that was so well said. I don't have anything else to add to that. I'm just gonna. I think I'm going to agree with Frodan based on what he mentioned, where I've seen this same situation in different games across different developers. I think TFT has offered like unprecedented access and interaction between the people who actually make the game and the people that play it at the highest level. And I'm not saying that Delicious Milk is out there pulling the puppet strings, right? But like, I agree. You have to. It's a balance. It's a tough balance. And, I think they've done a pretty good job overall, but, set 5 has been interesting. We'll see. Like I said, I didn't want to say anything more about it than I said stuff anyway. We'll leave it at that. Chat is on Jirachy's side. They disagree. So there you go. You've got an ally in Twitch chat, Jirachy.
A lot of the people who watch, a lot of people watch short challengers, by the way.
Fair.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
This is also me coming from like I've been like an esports fan for years, but like I'm just now dipping my toes into being a competitor. So it's like I am learning about how this ecosystem kind of works between the players and the devs. So like if I have a misread on how things are right now, like so be it. Sure, I'm just trying to make my way through this, and it's kind of like how this goes. Like getting into the whole esports thing has been just a wild journey, having done nothing like it before.
Yeah, and your opinions are valid, right? Because they're based on the experiences you've had thus far. So yeah, so you don't have to apologize for that. But yeah, I think it's fine. And the point of this segment too is to have to look at it from a bunch of different angles, because a lot of these there isn't a clear yes or no. I think in generally we try to pick questions that there isn't an easy yes or no answer for, unless it's question 2, in which chat 100% picked agree. But let's move on to our final question of the day. This is an interesting one from Frodan. I'll throw you not under the bus, but maybe in front of it. I don't know. Webcams should be mandatory for TFT tournaments. Jirachy, what do you think?
Ooh, this is not something I've thought about. Ooh,
that's good. We'd like to stump our guests.
This is even something that was on my radar at all. Honestly, my gut reaction is agree.
Okay.
Just like as a spectator thing, and as also as kind of like a competitive integrity thing, like you can. Like you can keep an eye on someone, like make sure you're not like cheating, and how you even cheat in TFT I'm not even sure right now, but like as a spectator thing, like having the cam on, really it's so cool. Like, and someone in chat mentioned Ramkev's webcam at Set 4 Worlds. Like Ramkev was so entertaining to watch.
Love Ramkev.
And like watching
watching
players' reaction to that's like hitting things. And I think that some of that personality is what we need in TFT. Like, and it's what makes esports thrive. Like being able to watch players like get hyped and really have fun, and even like that might even be the main reason just for making that mandatory. And it puts a little bit of a burden on the players to then like give that entertainment value, but like they don't have to be that way. They can just like do whatever they do, and if some like hype reaction comes out, cool, that's fine. And sometimes like having a webcam on and like even like artificially amping up your reactions a little bit, that can get distracting during a game. Even like talking during the game, like I had my mic on for regionals, and then after that I was like, okay, for like all the step 5 stuff, I'm just turning my mic off, I'm turning my camera off so I can really focus in on playing this game and have no other distractions whatsoever. But it does distract from like the spectator aspect, and it's like any esport, like they need to have those viewers, and seeing people's reactions is one of those things that helps bring those viewers in.
All right, Frodan, what do you think? I think I know, but let's hear it anyway.
I think Jirachy summarized my thoughts very well. I think that if you want TFT tournaments to be a thing, then participate and be part of the community. But you can't just come and take. You know, I think like some people just come in and say, I'm going to give my shot at it. And you have to give a reason for other people to be compelled into these tournaments. And a huge element is the human aspect of TFT, right? Like, you know, and it's easy for me to say because I come from a game of Hearthstone where right now webcams aren't mandatory for a lot of the broadcasts. And I can't tell you how much that has killed off a lot of my interest of watching Hearthstone tournaments. And I didn't even realize how big of a factor it was. I always kind of knew in the back of my head it was kind of important, right? Like exactly what Jirachy said, that having reactions is fun, and like, you know, being able to feel along with the player the swings of the game. But now we've been about 1.5 years of like webcams not being mandatory, and let me tell you, it is lifeless. It is boring at times because some crazy stuff happens. And, you know, sometimes the casters can only do so much to kind of hype it up. But thank goodness the world champion from Fates had a cam. Like, where you get to see jaywalking, get up, and hug his friend, right, SCSC, behind him. And, like, that was all that we could have. If we didn't, it would just be the least hype esports moment ever. And I would not blame Riot if they're like, okay, TFT esports is canceled. Because, like, look at this. How do you sell this? Like, who wants to actually watch something that was just like, all right, well, I guess we knew he was going to win, but, you know, he gets to second place or first place, and that's just it. That's teamfight tactics. See you next set. You know, the human aspect of, the human triumph of is what makes esports so interesting, any competition interesting. And I think that the webcam aspect of it is really important. We already accommodate so many other things. You can play in your boxers at home and compete at the highest level without having to travel, you know, and without having to like worry about all these other different things. The least you can do is buy a $20 webcam and turn it on and aim it somewhere generically at your body, please. Or just upper half.
Wow. Okay, I was gonna say. Well, I 100% wholeheartedly to the max agree with this statement. Webcams should definitely be mandatory, especially for any official TFT event that like Riot is involved in. It's esports. And more than that, it's sports. If you want to be a professional competitor, you got to be out in the public eye. You know, if you're not ready for that, then you're not ready to be a professional competitor. Honestly, like if that sounds harsh, that's just the way it is. And yeah, we get all these great moments on the broadcast that we need to help the sport grow. You know, you need those moments. You go back and look at esports over the years, you know, what do you remember? You remember the crowd going wild. You remember the players going crazy. You remember like Ryu's face after Faker kills him in that duel, right? Like you might not remember the actual game footage, but you sure remember that face, right?
Oh, I remember the game footage.
Yeah,
I remember who casted that moment too.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so
I remember that.
So you need it. You know, you need to have it, and it's just if you're uncomfortable with it, you know, then that's kind of too bad, honestly, because this is entertainment. You got to be out there. It's just how it is.
I want to say two things real quick. One, this also is important because for people who want to actually play in more TFT tournaments, building a brain is really important. So just putting yourself out there in some capacity is huge. So the fact that some people are willing to do it versus others. I totally get the whole, like, some people are not ready to show themselves on broadcast. But I'm sympathetic towards it. But at the same time, it's a slippery slope. And again, I've seen it abused right now in Hearthstone. Like people are like, oh, they're making. I've been hearing some ridiculous excuses of why people are not turning on the webcam, even though they have historically early in the tournament. And it's just not great. It lowers the overall interest. But I will also say the second thing was like, funny enough, one of the most fun things about the last Challenger series I casted was Rue being a VTuber. And also, like, because you still actually got reactions from Rue when something bad happened. You can see
I'm okay
Rue's
with that,
avatar
Like,
moving and reacting. So I'm cool with that because at least there's something we can play off of, and also, Rue's part of the community, and people love watching alongside. So I'm okay with that. Some people are like talking about like, oh, what if they just like use a VTuber model? I'm down.
I'll be a
I'm down if
VTuber next
all
week.
of us are VTubers, honestly.
VTubers are still a way of like engaging with the community, and it still gives you like that kind of level of comfort of like I'm not super comfortable showing my face, but I still want to interact with people, and like watching Rue, like there's still a lot of interaction and engagement just because she has this VTuber model up, and I think that's like we haven't really seen that from anyone in TFT, and if that kind of sets a precedent of like, okay, people can have their VTuber model and be a little bit more comfortable behind that and still get that engagement. Like, I think that's a fantastic thing.
I think it's cool. I'm not sure how I feel about it overall, but I do think it's cool. Maybe I'll be a VTuber when we do the show next. Who knows? Everyone wants to see anime DoA, I'm sure. This is a totally side thing, but I did go to an anime convention once, and I did cosplay as Yagami Light from Death Note. So I've been there.
I'm doing a rewatch of it right now with
it's a great show.
Taylor.
Yeah.
Very.
I think it's a great show.
No spoilerino.
Yeah. Don't spoil it for people that didn't watch it like 20 years ago when it was on or something. I don't know, but either way, I've been in that world. Maybe I'll be a VTuber soon. Who knows? It'll be the next step in my career. You all got to be here for the beginning of it. Congratulations. That is everyone's favorite segment. Agree. Now let's move on to everybody's favorite segment, Esports. That's right. And guess what? The GiantSlayer series, after a very long hiatus, is finally back. Frodan and I are going to be casting that along with other people. I don't know if I was supposed to say that. I don't know. Whatever. Nobody was going to be surprised anyway. But it's going to be a great tournament. Jirachy, did you watch any of the earlier versions of this back in the day? You said you started around set 4 though, right? But was this kind of before your time?
This actually was before my time. Like, I knew... Okay. I vaguely saw this on Twitter, like that GiantSlayer series was a thing, but I wasn't like head first into TFT Esports at that point. So like this really is before my time, yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, never mind then. All you need to know is it's the greatest TFT tournament ever, and it's going to be awesome. It's also duos this time, which is a thing that we had not done in the past. Frodan, I'm very hyped about it being duos because we've talked about how cool it'd be to see more team tournaments, so that we're going to get like multiple weeks of this is going to be really neat.
Yeah, I agree, and like I think this is like just another reason why GiantSlayer is awesome. I mean, we are on their channel, so they technically do pay us to say nice things about them. But at the same time, like a lot of the complaints about the mid-set finale was that there's no money on the line. Well, guess what? You qualify for regionals, you're gonna automatically get entered into another adjacent tournament through this duo $10,000 tournament. That's a really nice gesture from them, a way to reward competitive players. Personally, there's a little bit of trash talking going on. I would love to see a special guest duo of casters show up because there's a little bit of inflammatory language being used by top challengers towards casters and vice versa. All friendly, of course, and I would love to see us throw down. So I nominate Crone and Esports Law to go in and smash some skulls while DoA and I cast. But if they're not available, then I'll settle with the top challenger players who qualify for regionals. Yeah.
It's going to be great either way. I'm really excited. I can't wait. I was just talking earlier too about how I felt like we needed more tournaments just in the TFT ecosystem. So I think this is great that we're getting another one that didn't exist. Hopefully we'll see more and more new TFT tournaments every week. That's my dream. But maybe we'll get there. I'm sure we're going to get there. Actually, I'm not even doubting here. But go ahead. You have something to add?
Small aside. This is not, again, we didn't cover in the news because we weren't sure about the legitimacy behind this stuff because again, it's just based off of some people posting on Twitter with no official statement. But apparently in China, they've released a 2v2 mode, a spinoff of TFT.
Saw that video. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like not technically a proprietary thing under like whatever company Riot operates out of China. So it's not
Yeah,
like
sounds a little bit.
official.
Yeah.
But there's like a 2v2 game, and apparently it's like all the old sets are just set 1 of all the champions. And you can play that right now in
Yeah.
China, and apparently it's a China exclusive. It's not coming to the West. But a 2v2
Sad.
mode exists somewhere.
That
of
actually
Teamfight
sounds
Tactics.
super interesting. I know, I'm really
more
excited
than
that this tourney is going to be 2v2s because I think like it in my mind it kind of actually helps the marketability of TFT a little bit more and actually makes it more attractive to sponsors and people like picking up players because it's at least in my mind it's a little bit harder to just pick up like one player's like, oh, this player plays TFT under this brand. It's much easier when you can pick up a team.
Right.
Like, oh, if 4v4 becomes like a more standard thing, you have like a team of 4 players and like one team can like just pick them up. So like with Invictus just signing Goobums, DQA, Nubao, they get a 4th. Cool, there's a 4v4 team right there. Like that in my like not being around esports as a competitor for that long mind, like that team aspect actually it almost makes it more attractive for sponsors. And I think also like the team aspects of this game, like when you start like collabing with someone else, it just opens up a whole new dimension of strategy that you can implement. And I've done a couple like small 4s and 2s tournaments that like some of the people in the community have put on, and I've always had so much fun with them. Like TFT can get lonely. Like you're on your own, you're in your own head all the time, like, and sometimes you get stressed, but when you're in a Discord call with 3 other people and you're like all talking about stuff, it gets really fun, and it's a whole new way to play TFT, and I love seeing more team tournaments pop up.
Also decreases variance,
Yeah.
which is what top players always love, because if you only can get 1st to 4th in duos, you can't get 1st to 8th. So it actually does decrease the variance. There's more inputs, so the sample size artificially inflates in terms of like the entities that want to place high. So yeah,
True.
agreed.
Well, it's Teamfight Talkshow, so this is about the time where I make a comparison between TFT and StarCraft, like I always do. And this is another point of comparison I can make between it, where StarCraft, of course, had a very healthy single solo esport to it. Obviously, you watch solo competitors, but it's really the team things that back in the day in Korea drew the biggest crowds. Everybody loved the OSL and the MSL, the individual tournaments, but it was the team league, it was a pro league that really started to draw those massive crowds, because you got to see all the players sitting on the bench together, collaborating while one of them went to play that game. They're analyzing it. They're thinking about who they're going to send out next, depending on if their player wins or loses. So there's all these fun dynamics that go into team competition that you can add in there. And again, like I see StarCraft very similarly to how I see TFT, where it needs a very strong solo component to its competitive scene and a strong team component, and I feel like the game supports that very well. So, or at least it could. So hopefully we'll see more of this. And it's great to see Giant Slayer Series be that. But let's move on to the Reckoning Mid-Set Finale. Here is a list of players and where they qualified from. Jirachy, obviously you qualified through the Nightbringer Cup. Looking at this list, are there players you're afraid of facing? Are there players you just can't wait to face? Like, what do you think of the pool of competitors for the tournament this week?
Okay, I need to kind of qualify the statement. I'm not afraid of anyone, but I'm also not like looking at this list and like these people are just free. Like I can beat them every single time, because I'm really trying to come into this like we're all good players. None of these people are gods. And like with the variance in the game, and with how I know I can stack up to them, because I know I've stacked up to them in previous tournaments and on ladder, like I'm not scared of anyone, but I know like I can beat them depending on how I play, how they play, what the roles are, or they can beat me. So and this is part of like my tournament mentality. Like I'm trying to go in confident but not cocky. But I do look at the list of players, and then like there's obviously some really big names in there who I really respect as players. Like all the Challenger series qualifiers, Grubum's, Kivix, Pocky, Spencer. Like, I've played against them. They're absurdly good players. Like, and there some of the names in here, they're just standbys of tourneys, like Soju GV8 also,
Right.
Prine, I know he took set 4.5 off, came back in set 5 and just started crushing it. So Robin's in there as well. I think, and I'd mentioned this in I've mentioned this in other things, but I think the one person I'm really looking at, who I'm like, I'm not scared of this player, but I think he's going to do well, and I need to respect that, is a Nico. Like, I really think a Nico has been kind of overdue for success. He was killing it on ladder in set 4, but never really got the opportunity to play in tournaments. Played in like one challenger series and like did fine, but he hasn't really had a chance to shine until set 5, when he destroyed what I considered the group of death in the final day of Dawnbringer Cup. It was the lobby. What was it, like Nubal, Soju, Sphinx, and Nico, like some other name in there. I look at that lobby and like, oh god, and Nico's gonna have a rough time, and then just comes out and wins the lobby by like 5 points. Like, absolutely crushed it and had the most points on the day. Like, that was, for me, that was like his breakout, and I want to see him continue that in mid-set.
Cool. All right, Frodan, what do you think?
I think Jirachy turned on caster mode.
Yeah,
we
a little
don't
bit,
know
yeah.
Jirachy.
Got that
They
sense.
also are a caster, so
Yeah, I did start doing that recently. Yeah,
starting to,
yeah. I'm like kind of dipping my toes in that, but like it's
Look at
casting
you.
has been something I wanted to do for a while, and like getting to do that. Like Raza actually reached out to me and was like, hey, there's this weekly tourney series over in OCE that we want a caster for, and I think you'd be really good for it. I was like, okay, sure. And then Nature's reached out. I think he saw that. I was like, hey, we need someone to fill in for Fight Night. Want to come fill in on Fight Night? I was like, yes, please. So getting to dip my toes into casting has actually been super cool, and like it also it helps me like watch the game from a different perspective. Like I get to really critically watch other players play and see what they do, and to some extent force myself to be not to be like, oh, why did they do this? That's clearly wrong. It's like reason with myself, why did they do this particular move? So it's a whole new perspective, and I'm really glad I get to experience that side of it too.
Yeah, I think it's something that I want to put into essay form. I've actually been trying to come up with my own series of like blogs and essays to like what good TFT casting looks like, because it's so open-ended. And I think one of the interesting things that you mentioned is that if you want to be a good TFT caster, this is just a small side. It's not related to what you see here. Is that you have to be really open-minded, because you never get the full picture. You weren't there from the beginning. You don't see what the players are trying to commit to. So you have to come in halfway through and contextualize like everything quickly, come to conclusions, but also, you know, basically strong opinions loosely held. You basically have to come in, try to like make a declaration about what's happening, but also you have to be very open-minded about stuff, which I really love. It's a very it's something that's art and not science, and I like that about it a lot. Anyway, sorry to get distracted though.
No, I could talk. I mean, come on, like, you know what you're talking to. I could talk for hours on this, but unfortunately, we have to move on to a different segment, and I know it's going to be tough, but let's get to it. Let's get to the NA tier list. Nobody cares about this, you know. Of course, not an interesting segment for anyone really at all. But I know Jirachy's worked very hard on this, so let's listen to them.
I put thought and effort into this list and like talk to other people about it. So
I'm excited to hear it.
Okay. Should I start from the bottom or should I start from the top?
It's up to you. It's
call.
your list. You can take it out in whatever way you see fit.
Okay, I'll start. I'll start from the bottom. So number 10, I have Ramkev.
Okay.
And this is good. I don't want to talk for like too long about each placement because I'll be here forever. But I think Ramkev is the one I do want to talk about because he's one of those guys we look at as more of like a tourney player, and like a lot of the rest of my list is like a mix of ladder and tourney, but like he's basically the pure tourney player. He's hasn't hit rank 1 yet, I don't think, and he's kind of up and down ladder some, but like he always performs well at tourneys. He's super consistent. This man got third at Worlds. Like, you after doing that and after just being so consistent throughout regionals and the World Championships, like I don't think there's a world you can leave him off this list. So I have him at number 10. Number 9, I have Kurum.
Okay.
Max.
Yeah, and like, and a lot of this list, it's like I really value like consistency across tournament and ladder, and like Kerma I think is like the definition of that almost. Like he plays the game like he almost plays the game like too standard, but like it works so well for him, and he's super consistent because of it. And he does that both ladder and tourney. Okay, number 8 I have Goobums.
All right.
Number 7 I have Kiyun. And this is also some of these placements are like a mix of how they're doing in set 5 and also like how they did in like semi recent history. Also having like not really paid attention to the scene in like set even up until set 3. Like I only really started paying attention in set 4. Like a lot of like set 1 and 2 names that like they're really known for that aren't really going to be here.
Okay.
Like some that have like that really started there and carried over. But number 7 Q, number 6 I have Spencer. Number 5 I have GV8. And him and Kieran are like the names in here where I'm like, okay, I know they were really good in like starting out in the first couple sets, but mostly watching them in like set 4, set 5, I'm still like super impressed by how like they're keeping up with some of these like newer players that are on this list. And same thing with Kurum too. Number 4, this might be the hot take on here. Number 4 I have Pokygom.
Oh,
Okay.
all
Yeah.
right. All right. Interesting.
And he's like one of the newer players that like I look at and I'm just like I'm just so I watch him play and I'm just so impressed by like just how he thinks about the game and how he can like pull out these results, and like him winning the first Challenger series, like yeah, like he's killing it. Like he's just such a good player that it's and he held rank 1 for a good chunk of set 5. So and he was always like way up there in set 4, and I remember going into regionals, like Pocky was one of the names I was almost like scared of just because I know how consistent he is. So yeah, maybe that's like a slight hot take, I'm not sure, but number 3 I have Bertosaurus.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Same deal. Like he's just so good, and he's so consistent both on ladder and in tourney, and he's been killing it in a lot of Challenger series. And I remember watching him in the set 4 like qualifiers that led up to regionals. Like even when he was like bottom of the ladder, wasn't playing the game that much, I watched Bert and I'm just like, wow, how the hell are you playing so well right now when I think you're on like 0 practice? And like just how he thinks about the game has always really impressed me. Number 2 and 1 are kind of the old guard, and yeah, number 2 I have Socks.
Okay.
Okay.
Just
I think
Classic Socks in 2.
yeah, it's classic. Yeah, I mean Socks in second, like they go hand in hand. But
Yeah.
I just watch Socks and I watch how he thinks about the game, and also Socks being like the polar opposite of how I play the game. Like how I play the game is like it's a lot of like worrying about other players' boards. It's like I know my strength isn't like thinking about my own board and like building the best board possible. My strength is like building my board and then just like moving stuff around, positioning for other players and getting wins that way. Socks, I watch him, I was like, and I look at his boards, I'm like, this is the best board he could have built. And that ability to build the best board has always really impressed me about Socks. Now, number 1, I have Milk.
Ah,
wow.
what a
Okay.
plot twist!
Interesting. Yeah.
I'm watching.
This is actually out of
Top
left
10
field.
NA tier list betrayals, huh?
This is out of left field. Like,
Whoa.
Whoa.
I just
He is
see
pulling
Milk and I'm
his
just
fucking
like,
strings.
how the hell are you doing this? Like how can and how are you like how are you pulling these games? I look at his little chest. I'm like, how are you going 1-1-1-1-1-1-1-1? Like it's one of those placements I almost like I can't even really explain, but like I just watch Milk play. I'm just like, wow, yeah, this guy's absolutely insane, and like takes an entire set off, comes back to set 5 and just absolutely wrecks everyone. Like it's the caveat is he's not playing mid set. We don't see a lot of him in like tourneys now, but and maybe this is me like going a little back on like how we value ladder versus tourney, but also when I look at the snapshot points and I see that his lowest dropped was like rank 7. Like he was pretty much top 5 the whole set and rank 1 for most of the set. Like you can't ignore that. And like
Fair enough.
if I make it to regionals, I think if there's anyone I'm really like scared of, it's going to be Milk, because I don't really play against him much. Like I'll run into him occasionally on ladder. Like cool, he'll get first that game because of course he does, and it's because I don't play against him much in tournament, and he's just kind of like this entity I know is absurdly good, but I haven't faced much. He's like one of the few players I'm kind of scared of you. So maybe a couple hot takes, but yeah, that's my list.
This is a memorable list. The day Delicious Milk reclaimed the first place spot in the NA tier list.
I told you, I put effort into this. I put
This is one of the best thought out lists we've ever had, Frodan.
I agree. I think there's a lot of nuance to it. I really like, the representation of people from different eras of TFT in our short history. Overall, really well done. I thought we were gonna go and like, people are talking about like where's Nubal. I kind of thought that's where we were going with the number 1, but you said the 2 old guard, and I was like, he's gonna really put Soju at like number 1. I wasn't sure, something like that. I thought that was gonna be interesting, but
Nubal
it makes sense.
Nubal's if I keep going deeper, Nubal's definitely in there in like the 11 to 15 range.
Right.
Oh god, this is gonna be a hot take, and if Nubal sees this, like, don't rail me for this, but like, having played against Nubal in tourney, I'm just not even sure. Like, every time I hit him in 3 different lobbies, in Dawnbringer Cup and Nightbringer Cup, I hit him day 1 and day 2 of Dawn, and in day 3 of Nightbringer, and just like something just didn't click for him. Like I'm not sure what it is for him, and if with him in tourney, it might be just like a mental block thing. But like knowing that like possibly mental block exists for him in tourney, like I can't put him top 10 yet.
Okay.
And I think like my thing with all of these players is like there's some ladder people in there, but like they've all performed in tourney to some extent, and that's why like some of the people I'm leaving off, it's like I don't think they've proven themselves in tourney yet.
Okay.
That's all.
I like this list. This might actually be my favorite list, no joke. Because it is very well thought out. Yeah. It's from a tournament player mindset perspective, but it also takes into account a little bit of history. I like it. Well done. Well done, Jirachy.
Oh, yay.
I've never said that before.
I'm happy this is being well received, and it's not like, wow, like Jirachy has no idea what they're talking about. Like that's
I even you had me like going with the Delicious Milk in number 1, but when you explained it, I'm like, okay, all right, we'll allow it. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, well, we're not done picking Jirachy's brain quite yet. We have the mailbag coming up now, and this is Horse's question. And also, I'll mention too, Jirachy, while this is going on, chat, you may also ask questions to Jirachy. Jirachy will choose one as their favorite, and then you will win another $10 giveaway. So go for it. So Jirachy, you have the distinct challenge and privilege of answering this question while also reading other questions from chat. So good luck. God. Here's a question. I remember you were a little slow on your ladder climb in the first half of the set, but in the last month you've climbed incredibly fast. What changed? Was it just mentality, time spent playing, enjoyment of the set? Horso and the rest of us want to know.
Yeah, I know I touched on this earlier, like the mentality change, with like how I was approaching grinding, but also like it just at some point it just clicked of how like how I use my mentality, how I use my grinding, and also how I fit my play style of like worrying so much about other people's boards and also being like a super mechanical player. I know this like that's hasn't something that's really come up yet. Like one of the strengths I found is like how fast I can reposition and like and I spend a lot of time thinking about like how to optimize like swapping around my board. But like finding ways to actually be able to utilize that, and the first time it really clicked for me was like around a month ago when Redeemed was super good, because it's started with like the Lux variant of, and a lot of people I am talking to a lot of people that are like, oh, side doesn't matter, you just camp the right corner. And I saw the redeem comp and was like, okay, but if I can always be opposite side of the other player and get the squid beam across everyone, I can 7-0 everyone and just make the lobby super unhealthy. So like being able to find my comp that fit my style really helped out a lot. And it was like around a month ago, I had a day, and I know Frodan like commented on this on Twitter. I had a day I climbed 400 LP in one day, basically playing Redeemed, and I took a screenshot of this because I was GM when I started, and I was still GM at over 1,000 LP when cutoff was around 650, and that's still the funniest screenshot I think I'll ever take.
Wow.
1k GM LP, but like being able to find really finding the way that I can really utilize my playstyle helped a lot, and that's like, it's even as Redeem's falling off a little bit, being able to like getting into that groove of like finding my style, embracing my style has helped so much, and that's I think why like I turbo climbed in the first place and why I'm now like maintaining that kind of high spot on ladder.
Okay, interesting. Okay, that's really cool. It is interesting to see like when it clicks, you know. And I think everyone who plays TFT has those moments too, right? Where it's like you feel like you're just not getting the set, you're losing LP, you're like, what am I doing with my life? And then suddenly you just figure it out, you know. And then it just feels like you flow through the games. It's the best feeling ever. I'll give you a moment to look at some of the questions and pick one. Frodan, what you know, obviously you are a known ladder climber as well. Like, what's your experience been? You feel like you see that from time to time? You've been up there.
Yeah,
you know?
I take the stairs up and the elevator down, DoA. That is my method of climbing, if that's what you're asking about.
Sure. Well, do you ever notice yourself having good days though? Once in a while.
No. What even is a good day? What
I shouldn't ask you right now. A good day is a day where you learn and become a better player. Your LP doesn't depend on it.
Yes, but I did message Jirachy. I was asking them, is this a record to set? I'd never seen a Grandmaster break like even like, you know, 900 LP, let alone 1,000 and change. And then Jirachy's like, I'm not sure. And then they queued another one. I was like, okay.
Let's keep going. I was talking to some people, and I think I don't even remember the name, but there it might have been Taco Bell Wi-Fi, I think was the name that came up, of like 600 LP above cutoff or something, like something ridiculous. Wow. Like I know mine's like up there, but I don't think it's the record, which is it's
That's
fine.
hard to believe.
I have my 1k LPGM screenshot. That's all I need.
True that.
All right. Well, have you been able to select a winner, Jirachy? And I think there's a couple. Yes. I think
there's some really good questions in here. I like this question of, do you agree with the popular casters' assessments that you are a top 4 only player? And I'm gonna pick this because I disagree with that. I don't think depending on what I think fits like my style at the time. I think it's like sometimes I lean super hard into the top 4 play style, and sometimes depending on like what comps are meta and like how they fit my style, it becomes more of like a top 2 thing. And I think that's also why I was turbo climbing. Like me playing Redeemed, I was playing for top 2 a lot. Like, and I looked at my lol chest, and it was like 1 2 2 2 1 2 1, like a couple bot 4s in there, but there are barely 3rds and 4ths, and it's not. And I disagree with the assessment that I'm a top 4 player, not because I'm never one, but because that's not always my style. mostly like just playing the game how I think fits my like mechanical style best, and sometimes that ends up becoming like play super hard for top fours and slam stuff really earlier. Even now, I'm like the past month or so, I've been leaning into like that playing for the top two kind of deal, and sometimes a little bit more first or eighth. So
All right. Hey, for the record, I never said that. I don't know what casters they pulled there, but I have not said that. We'll see how this week goes.
I have a very distinct memory of tuning into the regionals broadcast right after game 2 and Mort Dog saying, I see Jirachy went first and eighth. Maybe they're a bit of a first or eighth player. And I'm like, okay, well, based on your 2-game sample size, yes, you are correct. That tournament.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That for the record, that tournament, I'm pretty sure that assessment was not correct because I was leaning so hard into top fours that tournament. But like, that's long run, depending on the day, it's not entirely incorrect. Yeah, sometimes I am willing to go into that first or eighth style. It just depends on what I want to do, what my goals are for the day, and what the meta looks like. Yeah.
That is correct. And I think that it's really important to know that those comments are also within context. Some players do want to aim for top four, and some players do want to go for broke. I think like it's not really fair to say a good player only plays this style. The best TFT players will adapt their playstyle to what the situation calls for. Especially now that tournaments require you a first place to win the tournament. So like everyone's gonna be a first or eighth player when that kind of dynamic comes out. So take those comments with a grain of salt. It's case by case.
True enough. Well, it's been a wonderful show. This brings us to the end of it. Jirachy, you've been a fantastic guest. Love chatting with you. Before we go, any final shout outs, final thoughts, comments, things like that?
Yeah, like honestly, shout out to just the community I found, like especially being basically the only like top non-binary player in the scene. Like I've really had to like find my community, find support from people, like find people to lash back at transphobes that pop up in Twitch chat. And the TFT community has just been absolutely amazing in that regard, and like being supportive and like recognizing me for who I am, my identity, my gender, my pronouns, all that. And I know when I first started like playing Fight Night, and I had to like, and I messaged Risa like, hey, my pronouns are they them, can you tell the casters? And being like a little bit of being like that little bit of anxiety of like, okay, are these people, is this community going to be accepting? And then just hearing the broadcast and hearing people get that right away, and I know like that's kind of expanded the U2 and all the other casters as well. Just like knowing y'all like consistently nail my pronouns and like nail who I am, it really makes me feel accepted as part of the scene. And yeah, I just have nothing but gratitude towards the community and just all the friends I've made through this game and this wild journey that I've been going on in the esports landscape during COVID. So yeah, just shout out to the community, shout out to everyone I've made friends with. Like I would not be here without the support and everyone helping me be better as a person and get better at the game.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you, and yeah, I think the TFT community is a pretty good group of people.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty cool. Yeah,
they're all right sometimes.
Yeah, I think we're okay. Frodan, final thoughts here to close out the day.
Yeah. As Jirachy has helped me pay attention to, it's International Non-Binary Day as well. So happy to celebrate that with everybody that's also partaking in that. In terms of things to pay attention to and shout outs, of course, thank you to our guest and GiantSlayer for hosting it. Make sure to check out the mid-set finale this weekend. I'll be casting with DoA, or I think alongside DoA. I think DoA technically won't be paired with me for most of the week.
They split up the veteran casters to wrangle everybody else, it seems like, but we'll get our chance again sometime.
That's right. We're the shepherds, and Admirable, Crowan, Necra, Mordog, Esports Law, they're all just the sheep. We're just wrangling them. So make sure to tune in. It can start tomorrow, where you get to watch Jirachy and all your favorite competitors play that's qualified. And then, of course, once more, if you just came in halfway through and you missed it, we announced the GiantSlayer Series Duos Tournament, the 10K 2v2v2v2 event. It's going to be really fun. DoA and I will be casting that. So definitely check that out if you haven't got a chance to.
Yeah. All right. Well, Frodan already did all the shout outs. Lots of great TFT to watch. Thanks again to Wisdom and GiantSlayer for putting on such an amazing show every time. It's great to work with all of you, and the show's great. Couldn't be smoother. Thanks again to Jirachy, our amazing guest today. Thanks again to Frodan for being a great co-host as always. Thanks to the developers who make TFT. They're always hanging out in chat, which is really cool and so unique in my esports experience. I love it. And thank you to all the fans out there in chat and everyone playing the game. So until next time, stay safe, play some TFT, enjoy yourselves, and we'll see you on the next Teamfight Talk Show. Catch you later.